Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with the Resurgent patch notes update. Yes, indeed, the update's due to drop tomorrow, and Creative Assembly has released the patch notes for us to look at. Now, this is a very long set of patch notes. This is the biggest update I think we've ever had for Total War Warhammer 1 or 2, so there's a lot to go through, a lot of patch notes to dig into, so let's dive straight in. Obviously, the Queen and the Crone DLC arrives along with Norska and the 30th anniversary of Regiments of Renown. A lot of new stuff. There's also some new goodies for the Dwarves. We'll get to that in just a minute. But for the Elves, all Elven races, including the Wood Elves, now have access to the Shrine of Cain campaign mechanic. So on the campaign map, there's a settlement, the Shrine of Cain, where you can build up a specific building. Once you do, if you're an elf faction, you can draw the Sword of Cain, and it is an insanely powerful item. It makes your lord into an absolute monster. Has an incredibly strong powerful bound ability, and yeah, it's just super fun. Now, any faction can get the Sword of Cain if they defeat the wielder. So let's say you're playing an Archaon campaign, you go over to Ulthuan and find whoever drew the Sword of Cain and take him out. You can now get the Sword of Cain, but only the elves can draw the sword itself. New text all around the board. Ungrim now has been moved to Karak Kadrin, and he's got a new ability, and of course Dwarfs got the Giant Slayers. Dwarfs also got a new forging mechanic, so similar to the Tomb King's crafting mechanic, the Dwarfs can now craft powerful items, and I will refer you to Italian Spartacus video on the subject if you want to know more. New optimizations and bug fixes, obviously, and one very interesting change that this one line right here may lead me to make an entire wild speculation video on its own, but Sartosa has been added to the Mortal Empires campaign. So yeah, it was previously on the Vortex, but not on Mortal Empires. Now it's been added. I believe there's a couple unique buildings there as well. There have been a handful of unique buildings scattered throughout the campaign map, so that's always nice to see. Now let's go ahead and move to some changes for Norska. Obviously they've got 4 new monster hunts, one for each of the base races for Total War Warhammer 2. Lots of new techs, including annihilating, and pillaging and so on for the new races. There's also a new Confederation dilemma, so when you defeat an enemy Norskin Lord, if you're playing as either Wulfric or Throg, you now get a Confederation dilemma where you can either confederate, you can execute them. So let's say you've had Sirtha Ek just being a troll bothering you the entire campaign, as Sirtha Ek usually does. You can now choose to execute him instead of confederating with him. You can also release them, and there's one other option, I forget, but it's a super cool mechanic. In terms of other new stuff here, Dwarfs, obviously, we went over a little bit, but yeah, Ungrim went to Karak Kadrin, and we've got a new Giant Slayers unit. There's the forging system, the resource rather for the Dwarfs than Canopic Jars, like it is for the Tomb Kings. The Dwarfs have Oath Gold, so obviously they have no need of Canopic Jars, so they've got the Oath Gold. New ability for Thorgrim, the Oath of Vengeance, and for Ungrim, the Red Ruin. Belagar's got some new skills, as do the Rune Lords and Runesmiths, Master of the Forge, which I'd imagine will help with the rune forging system. Next up, we've got general additions here, so High Elves got some new tech. Obviously, again, just confirming, 30th anniversary Regiments of Renown have been added. That is for Chaos, Bretonnia, Beastmen, and the Wood Elves. So I believe that's everyone. I may have missed one. Norska, I guess, comes with their own. But anyway, we've also got some overall improvements here. Lighting and shadows have been improved, which I have noticed. I do run an NVIDIA card, and occasionally I'll run into issues, I did previously with lighting and shadows, but it seems like it's been improved, so that's nice to see. The AI will no longer dodge artillery projectiles, which is awesome. That was the most ridiculous and silly thing, especially when you're playing an Empire or Dwarf campaign, or Skaven even for that matter, where you're relying on artillery to get a lot of damage done. The AI, you can almost like cheese them out, where you just continually force them to reform because they're trying to dodge the projectiles, Now that's no longer going to be the case. Artillery is far less likely to be sniped on the auto-resolve, which is great. That was, again, annoying and silly, so glad to see that change. In general, there have been quite a few improvements to the auto-resolve, so I'm not going to go over everything here. But Legendary Lords will now be recruitable when you confederate with that faction when the Lord is wounded. I did notice that. I was messing around with, again, a couple different campaigns before the patch, and I did notice that was an issue, so that's nice. And again, the Skaven food system has been reworked. There's a lot more sources of food, so you're a lot less likely to run low and run out. I did notice way back in the day when I played a scroll campaign when the game first came out that food in the late game especially proved to be an issue. It wasn't so bad, especially for Skrulk in the early game, but I understand for the other Skaven campaigns it's a lot worse. So anyway, that's nice to see. More technical improvements. Just overall, optimization and so on. Let's go to some gameplay improvements. Again, most of these are going to be bug fixes and so on, so we're not going to go over everything here. A couple things to note: the Chaos Invasion should happen a little bit sooner, and there is a turn timeout, so even if you're not at the appropriate Imperium level, I don't know exactly what the turn timer is, but in Mortal Empires, the Chaos Invasion will trigger at some point. Let's see here. Again, just more bug fixes and improvements. Let's see here. Lowered the amber cost for the final tier of the Oak of Ages, which is nice, so you don't quite have to paint so much of the map as the Wood Elves. Let's see here. Grudges that require assassination of the target have been removed. That's awesome. I always thought that was the most annoying grudges to get. They're super hard to clear from the book. And it's often easier to just take out the faction because dwarfs are so terrible at, assassination and all that. Let's see here. Mutinous Skits can no longer summon wogs from their garrison forces. That's great. Several regions have had their climate type changed. Malekith will hate some of these. That's interesting. We'll have to see what those are. Again, just more bug fixes and improvements here. General rework of the Empire AI, which is nice. Previously, they would just get steamrolled by a lot of factions, so that's great. Let's see here. Unique army templates for AI faction leaders, so that's cool. Basically, the faction leader should get a specific army, or they should try and recruit sort of a themed army, I would imagine. We'll have to see how that actually plays out, but that's interesting. Very cool. Let's see here. Added some food. Again, reworking of the Skaven food mechanic. Now, some of the battle changes. As you guys have seen, WoW is now a map-wide buff with unique visuals. Super cool mechanic. It gives a speed, charge bonus, and melee attack. Not quite as much melee attack, but it's still a very nice buff. Again, AI will no longer dodge. Great. Hell Cannon's homing is fixed, whatever that means. Summon spells that get interrupted during casting will no longer consume a charge, and this was probably the biggest issue for Kemmler trying to summon Krell, because Kemmler gets knocked over relatively easily. That'll interrupt the spell casting, so it will no longer consume its use. One thing I have noticed as well, and I'm going to be doing a video about Krell later today, is that Krell has had some changes. He summons a lot faster, and he also has a bonus versus large and some other things, so Krell is definitely looking pretty good. I'm sure we'll get to that later on in the patch notes here, but anyway. Let's see here. Fix some issues with the AI using the menace below. Ranged units. This is essentially what people call the handgunner bug. Ranged units will no longer march into melee range when they have no clear line of sight. So this essentially means that handgunners and thunderers and things like that are usable again, which is great. Fixed an issue where spellcasters who'd reached their HP regen cap couldn't heal other targets. This was specifically a big issue for the vampires, so that's great. Let's see here. Balthazar Gelt can now hide in the woods on a mount, which is awesome. Sneaky Balthazar. And yeah, all that jazz. In terms of the campaign improvements, I'm not really going to go through a lot of these. Again, most of them are just fixes and bug fixes and quality of life improvements, just small things that don't really matter too much. Obviously, I'm focused more on multiplayer, so I kind of want to get to that. There's a lot of multiplayer changes still yet to get to, so let's see here. Again, more just bug fixes and improvements. A lot of animation fixes I've noticed, which is nice to see. Auto-resolve improvements and audio fixes, always good to see. And now let's go to what I'm sure you guys are more interested in getting on this channel, which is the multiplayer balance changes, or the unit balancing in general. So have the impact of summoned units on the balance bar. This is great because in sometimes in games like against Skaven and some others like Beastmen too, especially, you could get a summoned unit that would tip the balance bar so far that you could actually trigger army losses, so that's nice. ROR stats have been adjusted to match rank 9 unit stats more correctly. So one of you had pointed this out in the video, that the Royal Altdorf Griffites had their melee defense buffed and their melee attack slightly lowered, and that is more just to bring them in line with the rank 9 stats. So you'll see that across all the RORs for the Game 1 races. Let's see. Increased mass for most infantry lords and heroes. That the patch notes will highlight only the biggest changes. So most across the board have had their mass buffed slightly. We'll see some specific ones in just a minute. And heavy cavalry mount entity mass has been improved, I guess. We'll have to look and see here, but anyway, let's jump straight to the Tomb Kings. Some big changes here. Doubled the amount of healing of the Realm of Souls, so the Realm of Souls now heals for a lot more. Conversely, Arcan's Tomb Blade no longer heals, so you can't Death Star with Arcan anymore, which is awesome. It was the cheesiest, silliest thing in the world, so yeah, instead, the Tomb Blade now summons a large group of skeleton warriors. So, I don't remember, I think it's 5 summons in total. It has a pretty long cooldown, but definitely a decent ability, and Arcan's still going to be a pretty competitive lord, I think, with that, especially against some of the missile factions, because you can get in, summon those skeletons in the back line, and tie up those missile units. Let's see here. Cetra has had minus 15 armor on the War Sphinx with some minus health and charge bonus. That's good. On the Chariot, he's had some slight combat stat debuffs, but a lot more AP damage, more bonus versus infantry, and more base damage, which is great. I didn't feel the Chariot of the Gods was super useful before, so that's nice to see. Again, same changes for the Tomb King on the War Sphinx mount. Khalidah's got more mass, which is great. She was made her really hard to pull out of infantry blobs before, so that's great. One thing you're going to notice across a lot of the Tomb Kings here is they have some armor and health reductions and some charge bonus reductions on their constructs, which is all great. It's a really, really good change because the constructs, I think, were a little too powerful before, but anyway. War Sphinx, Necro Sphinx, both had their armor and health and charge bonus reduced. Necro Sphinx also melee attack, or melee defense reduced, but slightly more melee attack. Same thing with the Sphinx of Uzek. Harrow Titan, less armor, less melee defense. Chariots got a bit cheaper, as did the Skeleton Archer Chariots, which is great. I did feel that they were too expensive before, so that's nice to see. Blessed Legion got a combat stat debuff. The Scorpion Legion got a combat stat debuff. Sepulchral Stalkers, less attack, but more melee defense. Tomb Scorpions got less armor and health, which is awesome. You guys may or may not know I'm not a fan of the Tomb Scorpion. Ushabti, minus 10 armor. Ushabti Greybow's minus 10 armor. Chosen of the Gods, same thing. Necropolis Knights have had their mass buffed, along with Khalida. And the Screaming Skull Catapult has had its accuracy improved. I'll have to test out the Screaming Skull now, see if it's any better, but previously it was singularly useless, so glad to see that change. Vampire counts, Hex Wraiths, a little more health, same with Cain Wraiths, nice to see. Those units were, because of the prevalence of magic damage in Game 2, they're very rarely brought in most matchups. Dire Wolves, more health. Dire Pack, more health and charge bonus, that's nice. Let's see, Terrorgeist, less health and less charge bonus. Probably a good change. Terrorgeist was pretty powerful. So, Vampire Lord, and this is something that's across all the Vampire Lords here. You can see Manfred, the Vampire Lords. I believe Vlad and the Vampiresses have had similar changes. They got more melee attack and more AP and weapon damage. 50 total weapon damage with 30 AP and 20 base. And more melee attack. Again, this is for the Vampire Lord. For Manfred. Manfred got a bit cheaper as well, it looks like here, which is good to see. Helmengorst now deals 30% less damage to himself. Oh boy, everybody watch out. So, Krell, this is one of the changes I was talking about earlier. Krell now has a plus 20 bonus versus large, and he is much more likely to ignore hits and not be interrupted. He also got more mass, a lot more mass, and he also has a much shorter summon time, so that's good. Let's see. White King's got a plus 14 bonus versus infantry. That's nice. I guess it more accurately represents their killing blow trait from tabletop, so that's nice. They've got Chill Guys, more health again, along with in line with the regular hex rates. Varix Reaver's slightly less melee defense, which is sad to see, but Strigoi Ghoul King on the Terrorgeist, again, in line with the other Terrorgeists, got less health. Vlad, in line with other vampires, getting a buff. Added Arcane Conduit in multiplayer, which is awesome for Vlad. He's a very strong caster, so he should have Arcane Conduit. Feasters in the Dusk, less melee defense. Konigstein Stalkers, less melee defense. Again, a lot of these Regiments of Renown, similar changes just across the board. Let's see here. The Mortis engine, very important. The Reliquary Corruption now has to be in melee to be active. So the Mortis engine, Helmengorst has the same effect, which makes him even more useless, if that was even possible, because he now has to be in melee to get that drain effect. But all drain effects, including the Plague Furnace and the Skaven ones, which I'm sure we'll see in a minute, the Warpstone Armor, I couldn't think of the name, all have to be in melee. But anyway, Vargolf, a little bit cheaper. Skeleton Spearman got a little bit cheaper, which is great, because they're pretty much an auto-include in every vampire army. Blood Knights got slightly more AP and more mass, so we'll have to see if that brings them out of garbage tier. Dark Elves, besides, all the stuff that they got from the DLC, are going to get some changes here. So the Death Hag got less missile resistance, but more physical resistance. On the Cauldron, let's see, 11% to 6% physical resistance. That's pretty good, because previously, especially if you stack Guardian, you can get some of your Lords and Heroes to like 44% physical resistance, so that's a good change. Let's see here. Dreadlord, more melee attack, that's okay. Malekith, looks like a slight combat stat change. -2, oh, that's just for the Chariot. Okay, interesting. More weapon damage in total, which is nice. I quite liked the Cold One Chariot before, so that's good to see. The Sorceress no longer has Primal Instinct on the Cold One. That's great. That was the worst thing, when your caster would go in rage, and made the Cold One pretty much useless for the caster. Cain Knight Assassin got more AP melee damage, which is nice. Cold One Dread Knights are a bit cheaper, as are Shays with dual weapons and great swords. Good stuff. Hydra, Fire Breath now targets the unit center, not the unit flank. That's great. Lizardmen, Krokar on foot got a lot more mass, which is nice to see. I do think that Krokar on foot is actually going to be a pretty viable option in certain matchups, especially against Norska, I think. It'll probably be a pretty decent pick there. Horned Ones, more melee attack and mass. Krokar on Grimlock got less health and charge bonus. Same thing with the Saurus Old Blood and Scarvet on the Carnosaur. Feral Carnosaur, same thing. Skink Priest on the Pterodon has a bigger hitbox. I'd imagine Skink Chief, same thing. Skink Chief also got -5 AP missile and -5 base missile damage, which is nice. Croc Scores got a little more weapon damage. Allosaurus got more mass, which they already had a lot of mass before, so that's going to be tough. Chariots, spoiler alert, do not work against the Lizardmen. Again, Saurus Spearmen and Temple Guard, same thing, more mass. Nice to see. High Elves, let's see here. Princess got more missile damage, plus 50 in total. That's nice. Sun Dragon got a bit cheaper, both on the Prince and the regular Sun Dragon, which is nice. Tyrion, +1 run speed, +2 charge speed, as if he needed to be any faster, but that's nice. Mage on the Ethereal Mar Chariot, -1 collision attack, max targets, so a little bit less effective. Skaven, the Plague Priest, -10 armor on the Plague Furnace, which is nice. And again, the Billowing Death now has to be in melee. Deathglow Bombardiers got more damage. Warp Fire Throwers got more damage. Catapults got their accuracy increased slightly. Gutter Runners, more damage. And Night Runners with slings, both more damage. Let's see here. For the Warriors of Chaos, Archaon on foot and on his mount got more mass and more speed on his mount, which is huge, because Archaon I think before was only like 66, which is just painfully slow for a a legendary lord. Not too bad for heavy cavalry, but yeah, I needed him to be a little bit faster. Let's see here. All Chaos Lords have +5 leadership. Manticores, it looks like, with the Lord and Sorcerer on them. Sorcerer, Lord, and Sorcerer, that is. Let's see here. Got more health and more damage. That's nice. Exalted Hero looks like got some buffs across the board. More health, leadership, armor, damage. Good stuff. Kolek, less health and less charge bonus. That's fine. Sarthrael, reduced collision height, increased projectile hitbox, and he has Arcane Conduit. So, I mean, the projectile hitbox, since he has such high missile resistance, it doesn't really matter that much. Reduced collision height, I'm not really sure exactly what that means, and added Arcane Conduit in multiplayer. That's huge. That's one thing I have noticed in the games I've played with Big Bird in this early access time period, that Arcane Conduit is great to have. He's a greater Demon of Siege. Come on, he's got to have Arcane Conduit. So, great change. Shaggoth, same thing as Kolek, less health, less charge bonus. Dragon Ogres, more armor and more health. That's great. I love Dragon Ogres, so really nice change. Javelins got a little bit more expensive than Marauder Horsemen with Javelins, and the Hell Cannon now uses a fixed trajectory corrected by homing. Interesting. So I guess it's improved the Hell Cannon projectile homing. Greenskins have quite a few changes. Wa, as we said before, is now map-wide and has a beautiful visual effect. Gives 26 melee attack, 18% charge bonus, and 24% speed, so good to pop right at the beginning of the engagement or right on the charge. Wurzag's got it now, and all the Greenskin Lords, for that fact, now have Wa. Grimgore's got more mass and more melee defense. I'd like to have seen him get a bonus versus large, but hopefully we'll see Grimgore getting some buffs in future patches. Skarsnik got a lot more mass. Goblin's been eating a lot of stunties, I guess. That's great to see. Orc Boarboy's got more melee attack. Savage Orc Boarbiggins, more melee attack and mass. Savage Orc Boars, more melee attack and mass. Hammer of Gork, again, this is something I noticed with a lot of the Regiment of Renown artillery crews. They've had their combat stats debuffed even more than just the regular changes. Interesting, though. Again, a lot of the changes to the Regiments of Renown we're going to skip over here, but yeah, the Rocklobber in general, and I do think that the Bretonnian Trebuchet is the same. We'll see in just a minute, but they have had their accuracy increased, so that's nice to see. Let's see, Wood Elves. Forest Stalker, Force melee defense modifier changed to 20%, 15, interesting. Ancient Treeman, and Durthu both got less health. Orion got his bonus versus large back and more AP missile damage and base missile damage. Wild Riders got a little bit less mass. This is kind of the heavy cavalry balance pass. A lot of the monstrous light cavalry got a reduced mass. Sisters of Thorn, max 2 uses of Shield of Thorns and max 1 use on Curse of Honor Hair. A little bit unfortunate, but just toning down each of those a little bit. Let's see, Beastmen, Kazrak got some buffs here. He's got more mass. Dark Mail is now a constant effect and affects any wizard in 40-meter radius rather than relying on them to be casting a spell. That's really nice. I mean, it's still kind of useless, but it's better. Kazrak's also got a Razorgore Chariot. It's been given Vanguard deployment, so he can now Vanguard both on foot and on the Chariot, which he couldn't before. The Chariot in general has been buffed. Same thing with the Beast Lord on the Razorgore Chariot. It's been buffed. Replaced Call of Violence with Apocalyptic Vision. And yeah, Brave Shaman Chariot. A little bit of a debuff there, but interesting. All Minotaurs have +2 charge bonus. Pharaoh Manticore got a little bit of a buff. Centaurs have less mass, and Slagogors have slightly reduced accuracy. Now, let's take a look at the Empire. Balthazar and Gelt can now hide in the woods on a horse and a barded warhorse. All Empire wizards have had the Channeling Staff removed for a new blast item. It gives a, I don't know if it's like a magic missile. I haven't really tested it out too much, but I imagine it's something like a fireball. But anyway, Boris got more leadership and more armor on his barded warhorse. Karl Franz got more melee defense, which is nice to see. Witch Hunters are now immune to psychology. They also have magic attacks, very interesting, and reduced missile penetration. So, that's a bit unfortunate. You can't go side shot and shoot like halfway through a unit of hammers or something ridiculous like that. Accusation is also capped at 3 uses. Empire Captain, who is still completely useless, got more armor. Okay. Warrior Priest got a lot more armor. which is nice. It might make them a little bit more useful. I use them occasionally, but Empire Knights, Reiksguard, Knights of the Blazing Sun all got more mass, which is nice to see. Crossbowmen and got 1 AP missile damage, but reduced by 1 base missile damage. Handgunners got 1 base and 1 AP, so just more damage overall. Great Cannons had its accuracy increased. Steam Tank gets more health, less melee attacks somehow, but a plus 15 bonus versus infantry. Very interesting. We'll have to see if that actually makes the Steam Tank useful. I don't think so, but Luminarch has more ammo, less AP missile damage and base damage, and explosion damage, but has a lower reload time, improved long-range accuracy, and it's less expensive, 400, which is quite a bit. Aura of Protection now gives 12% ward save, rather than, I think it was magic resistance or something before, and it deactivates when power is below 15, so similar to the ability that the Phoenixes have. Locus of Hysh also now passively reduces enemy power recharge rate, which is very good, so a nice little buff for the Luminarch. I really like those changes. Hammer of Witches, again, similar changes to all the Regiments of Renown here as to what we've seen before. In general, though, the Hellstorm Rocket Battery now has 70% AP damage, so it does a lot more AP. I do think that they're also considerably cheaper, 150 less cost. So I do think that maybe you'll see the rocket batteries a bit more often, but we'll have to wait and see. For the Dwarfs, again, Thorgrim and Ungrim got new abilities. Thorgrim's is particularly interesting. It's a single target melee defense debuff, which is really good for the Dwarves because they generally don't have the best attack, so you can single out a unit and say you have no melee defense anymore and we can actually hit you, so that's nice. Gromriddle got more melee defense. Rune Lord, the Anvil of Power, Locus of Power, has been included automatically, and it's slightly more expensive, so you don't have to worry about forgetting it like I often did. Master Engineer has had his accuracy improved, and this is one thing I have noticed. I played a couple of games against the Dwarfs in this early access. The Master Engineer is a sniper now. He can hit almost every shot, even against a moving target. It's quite impressive, especially big monsters and stuff. So I do think you'll see the Master Engineer more often, which is nice. He's got longer range, and the projectile mass and velocity is better. So hopefully we'll see Master Engineers more often. Grumbling Guard, charge defense against large. That's great. For some reason they didn't have it before, even though they're longbeards with great weapons. Again, more changes to Regiments of Renown in line with what we've seen before. Ironbreakers have had their mass reduced slightly, which is interesting. I think that's pretty much it. Gyro Bomber is its accuracy has been increased, and Bugman's Rangers have slightly less mass, which is a little bit unfortunate, but oh well. All non-flying knights get plus 50 mass for Bretonia, which is where we're going to go next. Albrecht, Spirit of the Tempest is now an uncommon ability, costing 162. I don't remember what it cost before, but okay. Prophetess, all the Scepter stability has now got the, it's been changed to the Scroll of Assault of Stone, which I used against Heir of Carthage in that free-for-all we played. If you guys haven't seen that for some reason, definitely go watch that. It's a super cool ability, drops a bombardment of a bunch of big rocks on your opponent. Pegasus Knights and Royal Pegasus Knights, reduced unit spacing distance, allowing more men to connect on the charge. I did a little bit of testing, and it does seem better, but the Pegasus Knights still have some issues that I'll be addressing in a future video. Their pathing is still a little bit borked, and sometimes they just simply refuse to engage. But yeah, hopefully that buff with some successive buffs later down the line will help make them more effective. Questing Knights got more charge bonus and less cost, which is great. Battle Pilgrims, more health, same thing with Foot Squires. Good. Hopefully that'll make them a little bit more effective. We'll have to wait and see. But Grail Relic, less cost and less health. Knights of the Realm, less cost, which is nice. Paladin got plus 5 armor on the Warhorse, whoop-de-doo. Green Knight got plus 600 mass, which is awesome. Blessed Field Trebuchet, and the Field Trebuchet, again, improved accuracy. The Blessed Field Trebuchet also has more AP damage, which is nice. And yeah, that's it for the actual factions themselves, so let's go ahead and look at abilities here. So Lore of Beast, Curse of Anraher has had its duration increase, which is nice. Amber Spear does less AP missile damage, but a lot more base missile damage. And the same thing with the upgraded. Gaze of Mork now does more AP and less base, so interesting. It looks like they're kind of going through and changing up a lot of the magic missile spells. I'll have to do some testing with the new magic missiles and see if they're more like standardized damage or what exactly is being changed there, but interesting. Fiery Convocation, removed random direction change angle. Okay, I didn't even know it did that. Hand of Glory has had its duration increased, which is nice. Fireball, again, similar, same thing with Soul Quench. Dance Macabre has had its duration increased when you upgrade it, and the regular version, it looks like. Curse of Years, same thing. Gaze of Nagash, similar changes to other magic missiles. Let's see here. Barona's Time Warp, increased duration, so it looks like a lot of the buff and debuff spells getting their duration increased, which is nice. Especially for a lot of the more expensive ones. I mean, they're so expensive to cast that you really need them to last a long time, so that's always good to see. Light of Battle, -1 power cost, oh boy. Lord of Little Law, let's see, same thing with the magic missile there, so I'll skip that. Night Shroud and Night Shroud upgraded, less cost, which is nice. Fate of Yuna, changed entity hit chance from 0.25 to 0.18, now needs 50 entities out to max out on damage, and +2 power cost. Now, I'll have to test this, but I was really hoping for a bigger change to Fate of Yuna, I'm not gonna lie. I was really hoping for it to be changed in a fundamental way, to not be a damage spell anymore. The way I see it, it really... I think it would be best as like an upgraded Melkos, where it does some damage, not a ton, but it does some damage, maybe a few hundred. And it also has a speed, and then you add maybe as well like a melee defense debuff, so that it's just a really nasty debuff, especially to cast on like a unit of high value cavalry or something else. You can slow them, damage them slightly, and debuff their melee defense, and then your own units can catch them and do the work in melee. I honestly think that would be a much better way to implement Fate of Yuna, but oh well, it is what it is. We'll have to test it and see if it actually still deletes high value units, because if that's going to be the case, then a lot of the new regiments of renown for the High Elves and the Dark Elves are just not going to see use because they're so expensive. But anyway, Lore of Ruins, Skitter Leap, and upgraded version had power cost reduction. Same thing with Dreaded 13th, that's nice. Guardian has been changed from 22 to 18% physical resistance, which is nice. Some of those stacking physical resistance buffs can get a little bit ridiculous, so that's good to see. Forbidden Rod, reduced damage to self, that's good. Blood Statuette of Spite, reduced damage, similar to Fate of Yuna, interesting. Nephrotis Scroll of Incantations, max 5 targets, that's the one that the Tomb King, oh, I forget the guys, the casters, the generic Tomb King casters can take those, so that's nice to see. Bloodlust can now target self, that's good. And Hellebron's Cursed Blade is a known issue, so I know Indie Pride made a video about this, and a lot of you had some good discussion in the comments of a recent video of mine about it. So yeah, it is a known issue, and yeah, even though it should have a recharge, it seems to continuously apply damage, so let's look for that to get hot fixed probably within the next week or two, hopefully. So yeah, that was quite a long patch notes video. That's probably the longest patch notes video I've ever done. But a lot of changes, a lot of cool campaign changes. I'll have a link to these patch notes in the description down below, of course, so that you can go read them for yourselves, and I would encourage you to do so. I have skipped over and probably missed quite a few things, so definitely go take a look at it for yourself. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Your support means everything to me, so thank you once again very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.